Welcome to TrekTrav, I'm Trav, and this is probably a video I've been thinking about for years now. It's a bigger video, and I'm going to do it in 3 parts, but this is how to make Star Trek Picard better. This is season 1, season 2 will be out next week, season 3 the week before, and you will see some things that I would personally adjust. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure to tell me what you would change in Star Trek Picard to make the show better. So I have notes. I sat down last night and I wrote tons and tons of notes about what I think would be the best for Picard season 1. And I'm not saying like I wrote bit for bit. Now, I wouldn't have started with Picard being, I want to start with Picard being on the chateau. I think Picard in TNG didn't want to be on the chateau. He hated the chateau. I don't think he would have gone back there, or at least he wouldn't be there full time. I don't think he would also be kicked out of Starfleet. And this is the characters section. So other than Picard, I don't feel like these things, but I feel like the beginning episode 1, would open more with Picard is behind a desk. He's an admiral in Starfleet, and he's sifting through pads. And what we hear is a clip of William Shatner, James T. Kirk saying basically,
"Don't let them promote you. Don't let them transfer you. Don't let them do anything that takes you off the bridge of that ship, because while you're there, you can make a difference."
I'd cut to Data placing the transport pin on him in Nemesis.
30 seconds, firing sequence.
Goodbye.
The Romulan star exploding, we would see that. A flashback to the Mars incident.
In effect. Cascade failure in progress.
This is an emergency alert. This is an emergency alert.
Flashes of Elnor as a child. I think it's important that to make Picard the same character, I don't think you'd have to sort of take him out of Starfleet and put him in an awkward situation. I think Picard being in Starfleet, sort of just staying there hoping that he can get things done and change, is sort of the way it is. I do think that he should go back to the chateau. I think Laris should be running the chateau with her brother. And I think Picard in general, disillusioned with Starfleet while still being in Starfleet, I think would be more of a torture for the character than being outside of Starfleet and just going, well, I left because they got bad. And I think that's primarily, in that beginning, what I would change about that situation. Secondly, what I would change with Captain Picard is Elnor would be a much bigger influence. I think showing him what they tried to do in Picard season 1 is show Elnor as being, I want to say, like a surrogate son, like a kid that respected him and loved him. And I feel like that Picard, while maybe left him behind, I feel like focusing on Elnor and Picard's relationship could really build up the father-son dynamic, which would make season 3, where I think the biggest changes can happen. I think the Daj stuff, I think that happens as normal. I think that's interesting. Do I think her sister aboard the Romulan-controlled Q. I don't see why we really need sort of so much of that. I remember watching the series and thinking, I don't give two shits about this Romulan stuff. At the same time, I think I would less focus on her and the Romulan secret agent, focus on her and Hugh and having that agent around, because Hugh's a character we know, and it makes sense for him to be here. And that's the biggest thing I think that I would change in season 1. Having characters who need to be there. Change Raffi not being addicted to drugs. I would say Raffi leaving Starfleet was a byproduct of her obsession with finding out the truth about these Romulans. I would probably go along the lines of an emotional attachment to a character who was maybe killed by Romulans during the android problem, which I don't have a problem with. I don't have a problem with the android storyline within season 1. It's not a huge issue. I certainly would have Picard, when he's obviously dealing with the androidness, he would certainly be talking about Data. So I think that could come back. You don't need Brent Spiner there. You just like him talking about this character would be okay. I firmly believe that he would have contacted Geordie LaForge in the first season to talk about B4 and Data. And I think that's another thing I would change. Talking to Geordie would make sense. Geordie knew the most about Data. Geordie and Data were friends. Geordie, it makes sense also that Bruce Maddox, who had been studying Data, would also be in contact with Geordie. So that storyline sort of stays there. I think Geordie would make a lot of sense in season 1. I think my favorite episode is Nepenthe, and I think seeing Riker and Troy and Picard running to older friends, super important. And I think that he naturally would. I think Rios being there is a good idea. I think him, instead of being some sort of rebellious captain who left Starfleet because his captain died, I don't think that is the case that you would go for. I think that you would go for Rios as a captain of a freighter. He's been discredited because after his captain died, he just couldn't focus. And you see what I'm trying to do here is keep it still within the Federation. Because I think the biggest thing, and I get that Patrick Stewart didn't want to wear the Starfleet uniform anymore, but at the same time, I think that it makes more sense if his disillusionment has been going on for a while and he's still involved in that. So he feels the responsibility of, I've been in this organization for years and I can't handle it. And I think with Rios, it's a similar thing. I think Rios should have been in command of a small freighter, like a Starfleet freighter, or a small like Starfleet ship. I think bringing it into that sort of Starfleet area is good. I think Hugh's storyline was important. I would, when we got to the climax, I won't go to the climax yet. We'll leave that for a little bit later. So Jurati. I wouldn't have Jurati kill Bruce Maddox. I would have him just die of his own accord. Jurati being brainwashed and then instantly forgiven at the end after she's killed Bruce Maddox never made sense to me. It just seems a little bit like, oh, so you guys are okay with her blatant murder? And even if she was brainwashed, I think that her being instantly forgiven just seems really short. It's like a storyline they didn't do right. In terms of 7 of 9, I think 7's plot was interesting, but there's no real purpose for her being there, although I do enjoy a lot of the moments with her, and Jerry Ryan's fantastic, so I have no problem with her being there. I would have to say the biggest thing I would change in Star Trek Picard Season 1, and I don't know why they didn't do this, is the Irremotic syndrome that Picard has. Now, we find out at the beginning of the season that his Irremotic syndrome is getting worse. Well, they don't really name it, but his Irremotic syndrome is getting worse, and he's going to die soon. That's great. They literally told us the show's going to last 3 years. Don't have the death. I get that the sacrifice is what makes the androids sort of realize they're doing wrong. But at the same time, I think having Picard sort of over the series get more and more desperate as he gets closer and closer to death would have been more interesting. I think that he shouldn't have died at the end of season 1. I think he should have died at the end of season 3. Now, all through the series, I would have made Elnor and Picard be teamed up. I wouldn't have had Elnor leave. I wouldn't have had a lot of the stuff involving the Romulan agents, mainly because it just seemed silly. Like, if you're going to don't have Romulan agents, just have the Romulans. And when they turn up at the end, I do think that obviously the cut and paste starship's bad. But having the Commodore O be the bad guy and the Romulan ships turning up, like, that's great. That's a big thing, sure. But we've built this climax of this android-like entity. They open up a portal, tendrils come out, metallic tendrils. They do kind of do it in that the androids close the portal and stop these creatures coming. But what it should have been is the Romulan fleet is decimated, the Starfleet fleet is decimated, and the androids just have to make a choice, and they choose to help the Romulans and the humans. I think personally that it would have made a lot more sense if the big bad was the creatures or the mechanical galaxy people with the tendrils coming through that portal as the big bad. Overall, season 1, I didn't actually mind season 1 too much. I wouldn't change too much. Some of the story beats are really good. I would just swap and change a few things. I think the biggest change would be, as I said, I wouldn't have Picard die at the end of season 1. I would have him sort of deal with that illness through the series. So while he's doing series 1, 2, and 3, he will come across old friends, new friends, and it'll progress that way. The big question for me is, character-wise, I think that none of the characters are really sort of bad. I just think that they could have been tweaked so that they created a slightly different universe. Now, I think Picard season 1 was a season 1. You're establishing the show, the new rules, everything going on. And I feel like establishing a relationship between Elnor and Picard in season 1 is important for my changes in season 2. And I feel like the changes of certain characters, I certainly feel like Daj and everything to do with the android stuff should have been sort of dealt with at the end of season 1. I like the fact that they dealt with the data stuff, and that's fine. I don't mind that being in there. The problem is obviously if Picard doesn't die, that isn't there, which is fine because to be honest, him dealing with his own mortality and dealing with the data stuff, like, he still could have met the ancestor of Sung. He still could have had a moment. You could literally just change it to, I want to speak to Data, because he's essentially like an AI brain inside this computer. Just project him in there and they have this discussion. And Data asks to die. And I think that would have been fine. You could have had that in there. You didn't need to kill Picard. I think that the La Sirena, while a cool-looking ship, I think would have been better if it was a Starfleet ship. I think if we focus more on bringing it into... There's no point going from the La Sirena and it being I don't know, it doesn't matter what ship it is, as long as he's got a ship to get where he's going. If he's an admiral, he can kind of sort of, maybe he doesn't have as much control as he wants, he can sort of get like a low-end Starfleet freighter. And it sort of brings that Starfleet in, what we know in a bit more. And Rios becomes a bit more of a tragic character in the sense that he hasn't left Starfleet and he desperately wants to be a good captain, but he just can't bring himself to do it because he lost his captain and he's just sort of having trouble adjusting. I think that would have been interesting. Dealing with, and in season 1, it's clearly Picard dealing with the connections through these people and building that connection. And I think that if certain things carried on to series 2, they would have made series 3 better. Now, these are just my thoughts. What do you think should have changed in season 1 of Star Trek Picard, or what they should have done slightly differently. This is all just my opinion. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I know particular people like to write essays, but make sure to like, comment, subscribe, come back next week for Star Trek Picard season 2. Made better?